Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Weedy Wisdom for the Curious Forager. Common Wild Plants to Nourish Your Body and Soul by Rebecca Randall Gilbert. So this is a relatively small book. It's one of the shorter ones from Llewellyn, and it is kind of, once again, what the title suggests. Kind of. So this is designed to be a bit of an introduction to foraging, and another reviewer put it pretty well that this is not a field guide, so if you're hoping for a foraging guide to actually use, it's not really there. It's more just kind of introducing you to the concept of foraging and using some plant metaphors throughout and just kind of chit-chatting about the concept of foraging and a little bit here and there, not a whole lot on how to actually forage. It also really only focuses on one climate, which is Northeast US. I'm pretty sure, though I have not confirmed this, that Northern Canada, that general region above us here in the US is going to be a little bit different, especially the further up you go, because climate and the further north you go, even though you're on the coast, I'm pretty sure it's still gonna be pretty cold. So I don't know how far up into Canada this would apply, but it's definitely more just think Maine for the US, that kind of general region specific. I don't know that any of these plants that she talks about naturally grow here in Utah because we're more of a desert. And I'm thinking I know one of my subscribers is in Arizona, and I'm I don't know that any of these plants would live there because it's so ridiculously hot. Same with Texas, most of California that we think of, because a lot of California is going to be that desert. Same with Nevada, even upper US, Idaho. And of course I'm thinking all the states near me. In the middle, I don't know. I don't know what the climate is. I don't live there. But I don't know how much of these are gonna grow in Tennessee or Oklahoma or Nebraska. I don't know. But it really seemed to just focus in on that one area. So I'm being generous with this because I know that I am not the target audience. So keeping that in mind, as a general, I would give this a 3. As a personal, it would be a 2. But I know that I'm not the target audience, so I'm giving a leeway star for that. The tone throughout this book was just off. And this was such a weird experience, but from the very first page, I felt and it was the weirdest experience, reading this book, I felt and this is so weird, I had to sit still, be quiet, and just cower in fear from this book, because it's you're not allowed to make a fuss from this author. It gives that vibe, and it's not necessarily all the time. For the most part, the words are fine, but there's just certain little things that you're oh yeah, if we were having this conversation person to person right now, I would not talk to you because you are gonna go off a lot, and I'm just not here for that conversation. Because there's a decent amount of eco-shaming, and we've talked about that before. Not the biggest fan. And I mean, it's there in a few of the different books. People love to say that, well, of course you need to go local and buy local and do it yourself. And it's that's so great. But, nah. And, whatever. You got that side of it. And the bigger issue that I had with this book started from the very first page of actual writing. You get past the publication page, that page. It's very intense anti-colonialism. We could probably get on board with that. Our ancestors were assholes, but I feel we gotta include the asterisks at some point, because this book really, really honed in on that. There was just little snide remarks throughout the entire thing that, to be perfectly honest, if you're white, you're supposed to just grovel at the mistakes of our ancestors and just constantly live in shame of it. And I'm I'm kind of at a point where we got to acknowledge too that the other side of the equation still had assholes, and we had no control over it. We didn't control who contributed to our DNA to be here. We had no say in that. And there was assholes in every single culture, regardless of where they were. There were assholes all over. People who raped, murdered, abused. They existed everywhere, regardless of gender, regardless of culture. And I don't like books that are just really focusing on like how much you, basically as a white person, need to just live in this like humbling because your ancestors were assholes. Because like all of our ancestors were assholes pretty much. Like there's very few people, when you go far enough back, a couple hundred years, they're gonna be assholes in comparison to where we're at now. People abuse their kids all the time. Women abused. If you were poor, you were abused. Didn't matter your race. You were just treated poorly. And so that was being kind of the main point of the book. And I just was living in like this like the entire time. So it took away a lot from the book. Plus the fact that none of the plants are really here. It was not like I can't just go out into the mountains of Utah and be like, ah yes, I will go nibble on like a cedar tree. I think it might be toxic. I don't know. But like that's not a thing you just go and eat. And like I don't know that you would like cook with sagebrush. You know, like it's just not plants you find here. So all of that to say, like I didn't like the book. It was just not for me. And I know I am not the audience. I'm not big into foraging to begin with, but like sometimes I can read a book that I'm not sure I'm going to be really interested in, and then it's like, it's cool, it's interesting, but when you feel like the author is going to attack you, it's a weird experience. I just didn't like it. I don't know if other people will like it or not. There's not a whole lot of reviews on this book, to be honest, but just that's where I was coming from for this one. I would say the recommended audience is definitely like introduction to foraging. It again only focuses on the one region and that's about it. It gives you some ideas, but really it's more like when you're just starting and you want to get some ideas of like kind of how it would go, kind of some things to keep in mind. It's a good like beginner step, but there's better field guides I'm sure that are out there to actually help you with wherever you are at. Would I buy it? No. I am happy to go drop this off today to get rid of it, because no. So I did take a couple extra notes that I figured we would just talk about really briefly here at the end. So the first one is the one I mentioned, the very first page. So it goes as such. After all, it is important to remember that no matter where you go in what is now the United States, you are always on indigenous land. I really love to bust this bubble. Did you know the entire planet pretty much would be considered that too? Because excluding potentially like Antarctica, and like that's about it, like the caps of the world where it's like just ice and really the only things that live there are very particular breeds of animals, like everywhere had an indigenous group of people. Every single spot, pretty much. This is one of those times that my like black and white thinking kicks in and I'm like, again, to kickstart your book on how to forage, just set the wrong tone for me. And like to give an example later in the book, on page 78, it could also describe my colonial ancestors and quite frankly, the human species in general, in that she's talking about weeds and taking over places and taking up nutrients and all of this stuff. And it's like, I'm so done. I'm so done. Because like, you know that not all of the ancestors were assholes, right? And like, what you're thinking of. Most people didn't have that kind of power. There was a lot of poor people. Crossed everybody. Everywhere. Everyone. We all had asshole ancestors. And like, why are we having to live in debt to dead people? Like, what are you doing in the now to not be an asshole, you know? Because like, there's a lot of assholes in the world. You pick your couple of problems that you're gonna work on in this lifetime and you run with it. For me, this is not my battle. I'm not in debt to the dead, actually. And if anything, it would be the more recent dead. And like, a lot of my like in-law dead people were assholes. And it's like, you know what? We're just gonna not be them. Not that hard. Because again, abusers exist everywhere. And to me, they are the bigger issue. But like, I mean, and it's weird to be like comparing things because obviously like, again, ancestors can be assholes all the way around. And like, I don't know, I don't love this like throughout the book feeling indebted to the dead and being like, I'm so sorry that like 8 to 12 generations ago, my ancestors, one little branch way off up here was an asshole. I'm sorry. Because, you know, we definitely haven't made changes throughout the time down, but whatever. And I'm sorry if that is your soapbox to live on. I probably sound really like dismissive, but like, there's a lot of issues in the world. It is not one that I'm a big fighter for. I have more current issues, like the fact that same-sex couples can't go to certain countries without being literally murdered. Anyways, everyone has their issues. Everyone has their soapbox. This is not one that I am on board with. So, the only saving grace of this entire book was on page 150. It is best to follow a recipe and canning instructions exactly until you understand the principles of the process thoroughly, as substitutions may be dangerous. It is possible for some kinds of poorly canned food to look and taste good, but be deadly. Then it immediately goes on to say that if you pickle it, it's perfectly fine. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't know if that's true, because I have had things go bad in pickle juice, so I don't know how accurate that is. But I do feel like it is lesser than canning, and I do appreciate the warning, because yes please. And then lastly, a thing that really irked me is that there is no books referenced in this book, really. There is no recommended reading, there is no bibliography, there is no sources, there is no nothing. So I have absolutely no idea where you're getting your information from. I would like to confirm things, and it's not there. And again, to me that's usually a big red flag. Tell me at least somewhere where you're getting the information. I would like to know, especially when you're making statements of what is safe, what is not. Where is this verified? No clue. So anyways, needless to say, this is a soapbox of a book. I did not like it. I'm happy to get rid of it. I would love to know your thoughts on it in the comments down below. And yeah, until next time, thank you to my patrons. If you would like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. If you want to check out my books, they are linked down below as well as on my blog. And until next time, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And until next time, blessed be.